Right, a very good morning, folks. This is day number 5 of week number 12. Hopefully, by next week, I'll be able to tell you how many days this trial has been on. But this is week 12. Remember that 2 of those weeks there was adjournment just before Easter, and then we came back on Monday. But yesterday, the former Minister of Petroleum Resources and former OPEC chairman, Diezani continued evidence in the witness box. And just to give you some background, on Tuesday, I told you that on Monday, the lawyer started by sort of introducing her to the jury. Because remember also, even if the juries, members of the jury were Nigerians, they were not. You wouldn't have known the background that came out on Monday. And then also the defense, remember also I mentioned that the defense and the prosecution, everybody chooses the style of how they want to tell the story of their own matter. So on Monday, when our defense was asking about our background, one of the things that was asked, I told you about our early life. The defense, of course, was a lawyer asking this question so as to bring things out. I told you he wanted to set a context, a sort of a framework, and that the dots were connecting from them. But yesterday, those dots connected very heavily because on Monday, Diezani told us that she had wanted to study art, fine art. That was her intention. But of course, you remember, in the 1960s, even till recently, if you told your parents you're going to study fine art in university, they're probably going to look at you like somebody who doesn't know what they're saying. So she told the court then that she had wanted to study fine art, but her parents said no, and then it took even our grandparents, it took intervention, for them to come to an agreement, and she went for architecture. So that, just keep that at the back of your mind. So that architecture that she studied, he said it also came out in this evidence. So yesterday also, let me give context. There is that famous tape where she told Kola Aloko that I'm going to escort you to jail, you and Gideon Mokore. Yesterday, our defense was asking her the transcript, because the prosecution displayed this, they exhibited this when they had a floor a couple of weeks ago. So the defense, wanting to cover all the bases, were going line by line on that transcript of over 1 hour. So they asked her, what did you mean? Tell us what was going on. Of course, 2 days ago, remember I mentioned, she said at that time she was in a confused and perplexed state. But yesterday, she shed more light on what she meant by saying, I'm going to escort you and Jide to jail and then throw away the keys, and I'm going to apologize to Nigeria. She said what she meant was that after she had been told, after people had come to tell her that Kola Aloko had been going around town saying, I'm going to do you, I'm going to bring you down. So, and then Kola Aloko had not been in Nigeria, that she summoned for that meeting in that 2014, that she called that meeting, and then in that meeting, and then she was saying, look, this thing happened under my watch. And then just to give you an example, she said, when she was now saying this thing happened under my watch, and Kola was saying that I know, that she told Kola, you've been saying that you've got things on me, that she said, okay, all right, bring it out. Bring it out. I will escort you to jail, you and Judy, I will escort you to jail, and then throw away the keys and apologize to Nigeria. So she said that was what she meant. It was not an admission of guilt. So she explained that, it's just like somebody doing something when you are the manager And that person is saying, look, Mr. Manager, I've got things on you that can implicate you. And then you say, all right, bring it on. If you have anything on me, bring it on. I'm not afraid. So she explained that that was the context that she said, I'm going to escort you and Jide to jail. And then I will apologize to Nigeria. Also, she mentioned again, it is the barrister, it is a defense asking questions she was responding to. She said, Jide is a friend of former President Goodluck Jonathan. Remember, all this happened during the tenure of President Goodluck Jonathan. She said, Jide Omokore was introduced by President Goodluck Jonathan. Not only that, she said, Jide Omokore and President Goodluck Jonathan, they are on first name speaking terms. So she was disappointed that you were introduced by President Goodluck Jonathan, that you are on first name terms. That means Jide Omokore calls Mr. President Goodluck. He said they were that familiar. So he said she was disappointed to say that the president brought with your friend. Now you were lifting crude oil without paying your own contribution of the cash call. She said this was what also annoyed her, and she was really, really disappointed that all this were happening under her watch. So that was why she summoned that meeting. And she said, of course, Kola Loko had absconded from Nigeria, so she had to summon him. And the jurors, they slipped in a question, two questions on Wednesday. Those questions were read yesterday, and so one of the questions the jurors wanted to know that if you knew Jide was threatening or Kola Loko was threatening to kill you, why did you meet her? She said, look, the security agencies had been informed, DSS had been informed, Mr. President himself had been informed, so she was not afraid that, she doesn't, she cannot be blackmailed. So that was why, moreover, Jide, Kola Loko had left Nigeria, and she knew that security had been taken care of. DSS knew that, this threat, that they were not just ordinary threats. So she had reported it to Mr. President. She had also reported it to DSS. So everybody knew Kola Aluko's threat. So she said that was why she said, I'm going to face this matter headlong. And that was why she wasn't afraid to meet Kola Aluko. That recording of May 14, 2014, remember I cited it earlier that it might come to bite her. But now she explained it that it wasn't an admission of guilt. It was saying, this thing happened under my watch, and you are threatening me to say, I've got things on you. This is Kola Aluko. Now saying Kola Aluko was threatening. Of course, Kola Aluko denied all that during that meeting, but she put it to him and said, look, you've been going around saying you have things on me. Bring it on. If you bring it on, I'm ready to escort you to jail. She said that was a disappointment that moreover, the federal government at that time, they had put in place a policy to encourage Nigerians who wanted to have more participation, to become more players in the oil industry, and to have supported both of them. Moreover, Jide, who was a friend of Mr. President, to have supported them to that extent, and then now coming back, lifting crude oil without paying the contribution of cash calls. Say it was disappointing. That's that. Then also how Jay-Z and Beyonce got involved. Yes. Yeah. Not that they did anything wrong. She said when they were hearing this news that Kola Aluko had bought a yacht of 14 million and that he was doing parties, for Beyonce, for Jay-Z, that of course Kola Aluko denied this, but that was why she called her for that meeting to say, look, you're living this fast life, you're living this celebrity life, you're doing parties, when many Nigerian youth are in poverty, when things are going bad, when people are not, struggling to live, you are doing parties, going to Grand Prix in Abu Dhabi and all that. She said, look, you are having all these sort of expansive lifestyle. She said that was also one of the reasons why she said, Kola, you must come to Nigeria. Sorry, they had this meeting here in London that she said, Kola, we have to meet. So she said that was the reason, because she was having party for Beyonce and all the lifestyle of the celebrity lifestyle, whereas you were not paying your contribution of the cash call. And moreover, she mentioned that on Wednesday that some staff of NNPC, they colluded with Kola Loko and Jide Omokore to be lifting crude oil without paying their own contribution of cash call. She said these things, she was really, really disappointed that these things were happening under her watch. And also, she said that, look, she came here that towards the end of President Goodluck Jonathan's, tenure in 2015, she had been having feelings, becoming sick, becoming tired. She thought it was just the stress of what was happening under her watch and also the rigor of her job. But then she said, then she came over to London here to have a test, because she said, I always do my annuals every time. So she said, on coming here to London, they did test. And firstly, they told her everything is clear because she was feeling something on her left breast. She said, but when they first told her good news, we didn't detect anything. She was happy. Of course, her family was happy. Her husband, her ex-husband was happy. I'll be coming to the former husband later. She said they were happy. But after returning to Nigeria, the professor called her to say, I'm sorry, we've got bad news. It seems you've got cancer. She said, this was triple negative cancer, aggressive triple negative cancer. So she had to come back. She said, even the hospital made a mistake. She nearly died because, they made a mistake in the treatment. She said, so she had to undergo treatment. 2 weeks after finishing chemotherapy, National Crime Agency arrested her in 2015. She said she left Nigeria May 22 of 2015, and since then she's been trapped. She said 2 weeks. It was 2 weeks after finishing her triple negative chemotherapy treatment that NCA arrested her. So she was saying this. She gave all this, and then of course our barrister was asking her, why your divorce? She asked, how was it? Of course, she said, I'm not trying to pry, but again, probably trying to just establish something. She said, well, when she had that diagnosis, when she came for that treatment appointment to check what was happening to her left breast, her husband was around. That was in 2015. She said, since that time, after that diagnosis, that she did not see the husband again until 2022 when their son graduated. She said, he said, in her own words, my husband withdrew from my life. She said she then had to institute divorce proceedings. So that was that. Of course, it was quite a tricky one, quite emotional. And so they didn't just go too much. That was all that was left over there. And also, so this was how it happened yesterday. And then they were asking her questions on the properties, the 5 properties that have been linked to her. And she said, no, I do not own Harley House. She said it wasn't hers. She only gave advice on Harley House, 58 Harley House, which has been mentioned there. Interestingly, the same Harley House, which she's been indicted for here, when NCA initially seized it, of course, all this came out in court again yesterday. NCA later released that property to the owners, and that property, 58 Alley House, has been sold off. But she's here being indicted for it. So, but the defense continues this morning. This is day number 5 of our evidence. We are hoping today will be the final day for our evidence, but you never know. Today, court closes at 1:30 and we're starting 9:30. So those are the things which she said, quite a lot of things that, even Mr. Aliko Dangote, when all these things were happening in 2014, when there were rumors of Kola Loko and Jide Omokore, collecting crude oil, not paying cash call, that even Aliko came to her house, Aliko Dangote. The barrister asked her, who is Aliko? Just for the jurors, not assuming anything. And then she mentioned that, look, Aliko is the richest man in Africa. and that, that when Aliko takes a stand on something, it sticks. That, they were telling her that these your people are living the lifestyle of celebrities, that, that they bought a yacht of $14 million, and they were owing NNPC the equivalent of their cash call over $100 million. Yet they bought a yacht of 14 million. And she said, Kola Aliko, of course, denied it. But Aliko was among those people who came to her house to tell her, look, this is what your people are doing. So she said, she was really disappointed that these two people, that the presidency, that the Nigerian oil industry went out to give the opportunity to be a major player in the oil industry. This is how they reward us, by supporting them, by lifting crude oil behind their back, with collusion with people from the ministry, lifting crude oil, owing over $200 million, are not paying the equivalent of their cash call. So she said those were the things going on in her mind. And this is the context of that famous tape, that the prosecution leaked out, which has gone around that to say, look, she said, I'm going to escort you to jail. She said it's not an admission of guilt at all. So she explained it, so I'm going to leave it here for now. And so many things I'm going to be quoting. There was a lot of dialogue between her and the defense. Of course, it is when the defense finishes that the prosecution will have the chance to do cross-examination. But all through yesterday, the 4 sessions yesterday till nearly 4 p.m., it was Diezani who was in the witness box, answering questions from a barrister, and also answering the questions that the jurors slipped in on 2 occasions. Thank you. I'll see you next time.